Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I just want to welcome you all to this version of a consultation and a dialogue for supervisors about this really challenging transition period we're about to go into. As you all know, Brooklyn College has always been an on-campus operation, except for the last 14, 15 months, where the pandemic has sent us all into a new environment, one that has been almost entirely remote. And today's session is part of our preparation for a transition phase, which really is the whole fall semester is a transition phase for us. We are in this important transition phase starting August 2nd, which is a date that the Chancellor has identified as the date to begin the transition back for remote employees. And I really think of the whole fall semester as that transition period, that temporary phase from about August 2nd to about January 15th. And so we're looking to develop schedules for that duration of time. If all goes well with the pandemic, that is, it lessens and lessens, vaccinations increase, we achieve herd immunity and substantial safety as a result of those things, CUNY has indicated that we will be back fully on campus in the spring semester. Those are a lot of conditional statements and things are obviously in flux, but I wanted to share with you sort of the trajectory that we are looking at if all goes particularly well. So what we're doing is trying to set up these temporary schedules with an optimistic hope that all does go well in the fall semester and that we are taking that time to slowly transition back to normal, as it were, for the campus. We have watchwords in terms of the work that we are doing around this transition phase. And our watchwords for this presentation are safety, equity, and fairness. And we are extremely committed, as we have always been, to safety on campus. The offices that people return to will be safe. You'll learn a little bit about that. We have a reentry plan that includes mandatory masking, social distancing, ventilation improvements, cleaned spaces, and the notion that the density on campus will be lowered than it has been, certainly than it was when we were all on campus. We're also, as I've mentioned before in my return to campus letters, we're also moving toward a scheduled appointment system rather than a drop-in system for most offices, which I think will also enhance safety. In terms of equity and fairness, we are all going to have to share the load of the transition back. And we want to do it in a way that provides some gradual some gradual transition. Overall, as we've mentioned, we expect almost all offices will have some in-person presence during normal business hours during the week. In the fall semester, we assume that this will happen mostly through rotational schedules where there are multiple people in the office, and there's lots of variation across a lot of different offices. And I think we'll speak very generally about those varieties. In terms of your work developing fall schedules with employees, we hope that to have your collaboration and cooperation throughout this process. We need to all work together to come to safe, equitable, and fair schedules for the fall. People have strong feelings about this, and we want people to feel both heard and also know that it's our goal to come to this process of transition in a way that maximizes everyone's opportunity to do partly remote, partly in person in the fall semester, so that the transition is a real transition for most people in preparation for a spring that will be back to normal if all goes well from a safety perspective. We really appreciate your collaboration and cooperation. and hope that you can learn from today's meeting, contribute to today's meeting. And I want to turn it over to Tunji right now, who is going to give us a presentation. Thank you for moderating this, Tunji.
Thank you so much, President Anderson, and thank you to everyone that has joined us today. So this session is just one in a series of events created to keep everyone informed and engaged as we transition back to campus. So therefore, today we're presenting our Return to Campus Open Forum and Consultation for Supervisors. To provide guidance and answer your questions, we have a few of our campus subject matter experts joining us today. We have Anita Simmons, Director of Human Resource Services, Alan Gilbert, Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration. We also have Carrie Sadonovic, from Director of Environmental Health and Safety, and Darshan Lee, the Acting Director of Facilities and Planning. So let's take a look at our event agenda for today. We're going to hear the guidance for supervisors, the moderated Q&A for previously submitted questions and categories, the moderated Q&A from live audience, including the chat, and we'll end with the wrap up and a thank you. However, before we begin, I would like to share our guidelines for our meeting etiquette. Please mute all microphones. And we know that you have questions, and our subject matter experts will be answering the questions that you submitted prior to the event. In addition, we have the live question and answer session, so please wait until all previously submitted questions are answered before submitting your questions in the chat, as your questions may be answered during our open forum. Now, please join me in welcoming our first campus expert, Anita Simmons, to provide guidance for supervisors.
Thank you so much, Tunji, for that introduction. Welcome, everyone, this afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions out there. My goal this afternoon is to walk through the guidance that the president sent out last week to supervisors and managers that talks about the transition and coming back over this next semester to the campus. First thing I want to do, or that's important for us all to do, is to acknowledge the fear and the real fear, I should say, and the anxiety that most people have about this topic. I have received a number of calls and emails about what individuals want to do without the benefit of having talked with their department at all, their supervisor or their manager. So again, one of the important things to do today is to just walk through the guidance that the president gave us, and then, get to what questions, and again, I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there that we have. So the president just talked about wearing masks, and we've gotten a lot of those questions recently with the changes in the CDC guidelines. Wearing masks is definitely going to be mandatory, not only on the campus grounds, but in the workspaces, in the offices. We will continue to wear a mask. Environmental health and safety will work with those departments that deal with shared space. There are many, many considerations to think through about shared spaces. Examples of those departments are a library, the learning center, early childhood. The environmental health and safety will be working very closely with you on those issues and questions that come up. Employees experiencing COVID symptoms will continue to be quarantined. We and HR will continue to, and environmental health and safety will continue to track and report people where they are and how long they've been out, when they are scheduled to come back, and all that goes along with those issues of people being out. In the fall, students are going to be required to be vaccinated. That does not apply to employees, to a lot of people's sadness that it doesn't, but it does not apply to employees. It does apply to students, and that will begin in the fall. People who are not vaccinated will be required to go through mandatory weekly COVID testing. A lot of the details of this are not worked out yet, but that is what's scheduled to happen. Also that we're gonna have testing, I believe, on site at the campus, in addition to a number of other places in the area. So those are safety considerations. Office expectations. We prioritize safety. We've talked a lot about that. We expect that all offices will have some type of in-person presence during normal hours. In the fall, chairs, department heads, deans, the action item here is to figure out what is that minimal number that you believe is required in the spaces that you have across the campus that is going to be needed to provide that appropriate level of support for on-site operations. And this, again, is to share the load and to support the college and the services that we provide to our students. Temporary work and flexible schedules. So again, department heads, chairs, deans, we need to determine the staff that we have and what does that number look like that should be available on premises at any one point in time. What's the schedule look like? Rotational and staggered schedules shared across the campus and across as many people as possible is going to help us, again, to share the load and the responsibility to support not only the students, faculties, but the other colleagues that we work with across the college. Share the load, be equitable, and get back to normal as soon as we can, which hopefully, again, is going to be in the spring. I also listed, there's a variety of ways when we talk about temporary schedules, a variety of ways to do this. You can have people or depart teams shifting 1 week off, 1 week on. You can have, there are start times that were listed in that slide, that last slide that we just looked at, from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. There are end times between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. Or there's the schedule that we're getting ready to go into that looks like the summer schedule, where people work Monday through Friday, an extended work week, and then don't work on Friday. There's a number of ways that this can be done, but this is what every area needs to do to take a look at what makes sense for you. Does this work? Because we've had a lot of questions about how everybody's going to fit into a particular space. Everybody does not have to be take up the same space at the same time. And as I think the president mentioned, we're talking about minimal representation and coverage in our offices. So beginning the week of August 2nd, again, as the president mentioned, is when staff are scheduled to return for in-person services. For faculty will follow the schedule in accordance with the academic calendar. Again, to ensure safety, documented work agreements between employees and supervisors should be reviewed by the division head before they are signed and finalized. Now, there's been a lot of confusion about the work agreements because this is something else that I've received a number of work agreements where the individual has not spoken with their department at all, anyone in their department. And some of that is due to, I believe the union has given out, information to people. And the purpose of these info sessions and guidance is to make sure we're all on the same page, we're all saying the same thing, we're coordinated, and it is a collaborative effort, and to, by all means, to reduce the confusion and the number of questions and concerns that are out there. So that's temporary work agreements. Let's talk about reasonable accommodations, which is also many, many questions about. So I will not get into the detail of accommodations, but just say that it's important for everyone to know there are all sorts of accommodations that can be made. There are people who may have medical situations that require a certain accommodation. There are still people that struggle with providing care to a family member or to children that may keep them from coming to work full time or whatever, or they have to work totally remotely. There are links and there are documents out there. There's a different form depending upon the type of request that people have that to be filled out that will come to my office. HR will review them case by case basis. And it's A to Z, the gambit of things that could happen. But the very important thing for you to walk away with and know is that there will be a review process. There should be a review process in terms of, we're talking the work agreement and what the department decides to do and what they have come out with is reasonable to have people on site. From an accommodation request process, all of those requests, the forms, there's documentation, comes to my office. I will review and make either referrals or talk to departments based upon what I'm getting. So that's the important thing for the takeaway for you to know today. And that is it on my portion of this presentation.
Well, thank you, Anita, for sharing that information. So now it is time for our campus experts to answer your previously submitted questions that I will now read. So the first question is, if the staff isn't student-facing and the job function can be performed 100% remotely, does the staff still need to be on campus?
This is a question that the managers will get a lot. And we go back to the shared responsibility, collaborative effort, discussing with it in the department to make sure that that makes sense, that the person can work 100% remotely. Sure, we could all continue to work remotely, but the charge is, how do we prepare? How do we plan for phasing ourselves back in and to do a transition? And in doing that, if we want to be fair and equitable, we need to consider everybody that rolls up or that we have responsibility for in terms of providing services before we can make that decision. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you. And for our next question. What are allowable reasons for employees to continue working fully remotely?
What are reasons? Someone has documentation that indicates they are, I'm going to say, let's say it's a medical situation. They can work, but it's not a definite decision that as a result of people not necessarily everybody being vaccinated, their doctor has determined that it is not safe for them to come back to work fully. So that would be an example of someone who has has demonstrated, who has documentation that says, I can continue to work remotely. I just cannot be exposed at this time, for lack of a better description, because everyone is not vaccinated. So that would be something that we would consider that person not being able to work, that can stay at home and work remotely.
Okay, so we'll go to the next question, which is, can a part-time employee be allowed to work fully remotely?
And I've gotten this question already. Again, it goes back to what the department decides is going to be a reasonable mix of people that need to be represented on campus. Part-timers, if they are on campus, they need to be supervised, so you need to keep that in mind. But if there is a need, for lack of a better description, they should be in the mix to determine whether or not they should be fully remote or they should be on site and in person, because they too are making a contribution to provide services to the college.
Thank you. Our next question is, when will supervisors receive information specific to our areas regarding the number of people who can be in each space at a time?
Thank you, Tunji, and thank you, President Anderson and Anita, for your introduction and the assistance that your guidance that you've been providing. This has been so helpful, and I know as a supervisor myself, we have a lot of questions about how to do this, and I think it's been framed nicely, and appreciate the guidance that you're providing. For this question, I want to remind everybody that preventing the spread of COVID-19 on campus is really a layered approach, and the reducing of density on campus is one point, one piece of that, one layer. And so I would say that in general, supervisors can move forward with their fall scheduling plans with more consideration towards what is the need to support campus function, providing that minimum presence with safety and equity in mind, because in the overwhelming number of locations, this schedule is going to be far lower than the COVID-related capacity. One thing to keep in mind is that the college is going to be submitting our campus reopening plan, revised reopening plan to CUNY on June 15th. That plan has been posted on our website since last August. It's assumed that we will get a response from CUNY within at least perhaps 2 weeks. And what we would like to be able to do is to get that response and approval from CUNY, because it's going to help determine our density. And supervisor return plans for their schedule are going to be accepted after that date when we get the approval. And we'll be providing the capacity numbers after we get that approval from CUNY. Back to you, Tunji.
Thank you so much. Okay. Pulling up our next question. Will the plexiglass safety barriers be purchased for reception areas?
Okay, so, and just going back to the principles that guide how we determine where certain controls are placed is based on a risk assessment. And we know that occupational titles where there's a more frequent or close contact with students or members of the public may be at, and just because of the volume, may be at a higher risk, and therefore the using or installation of a barrier will be appropriate for those kinds of front desk situations. We've worked with facilities in ordering ready-made plastic barriers that are of a standard size that will fit the majority of locations, and those will be available for the front desk operations. We are discouraging from putting these up all over our campus, and the main reason for that is safety. because we need to have air flowing, as well as having a see-through barrier. May have happened to you. They can have sharp edges, and people don't necessarily see them, or they're not as sturdy as, say, a wall. So we really only want to put them where they're absolutely necessary. So those front desk locations will be prioritized.
Thank you for providing that information. So our next question is about equipment. Will computers be upgraded with cameras and software for work that requires Zoom meetings?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see so many people. 152 participants in the room, which is an amazing turnout. 'Cause I think we had 154 registrations an hour ago. So excellent, seeing so many people, and so we can convey this important information. As we all are aware, computers, desktop computers on campus do not have cameras and microphones because prior to COVID, there really was not a need for that. Obviously, when we return, there will be a need for that. We already have an order for 1,000 web cameras with microphones that will be plug and play. You'll be able to plug them right in. And the expectation is that unless there's, we cannot get the supply in from the vendors, which has been always a possibility during these times. But we have every reason to believe that, well before people return, these devices with the microphones will be installed on everyone's desktop computer. So those people who are on campus and will be attending Zoom meetings while they're on campus will have access, so they'll be able to be seen on the screen and be able to communicate with other members of those meetings.
Thank you. Now we have our last question from the previously submitted questions for this event, which will be, how will C-entry be effective with the increasing amount of people entering campus and the time it takes for each person to get checked in?
Yeah, okay, I am handling that one as well. And I saw several things in the chat that I'll be addressing as well as part of this answer. So some of you have not been on campus, so let me just, sort of review how we've done entry over the last, several months. Our IT team has developed a system called C-Entry, which was a virtual sign-in system, because it was very important for us to know who was on campus, and because the access was very restricted to campus. So everyone who had authorization to be on campus was in the system, and individuals, they were not in the C-Entry system, they were not allowed on campus. In addition to C-Entry, everyone on campus needed to do a daily wellness check. The university acquired a product called Everbridge. Those of you who've been on campus are familiar with it. Those of you who have not been on campus may not be familiar with it. Everbridge is a wellness check. It's a daily self-reported wellness check. Many of you may have done something similar, going to other venues. Every person coming to campus has to answer a series of questions. And based on their responses to those questions, they may or may not be allowed on campus. So if someone answered a question that was considered a risk, if you answered yes, for example, you're having a temperature over a certain amount then required, and you answer yes, you would not be allowed on campus. If obviously you were tested positive for COVID, you would not be allowed on campus. If you have symptoms, the standard COVID symptoms, you would not be allowed on campus. Unfortunately, if you make a data entry mistake, you will also not be allowed on campus. And for every case that's recorded as a disallowance of being on campus, whether it's faculty, staff, or students, those get referred appropriately. Students get referred to Vice President Ron Jackson and Dean Marimer Smith. Employees get referred to HR Director Ayanna Murray and Executive Director Anita White Simmons. Every one of these are thoroughly followed up on. We want to make safety is a top priority. Individuals are not allowed on campus until there is an appropriate resolution, which could mean actually having a negative test or quarantining. It depends on the circumstances. The questions in Everbridge evolve. So until very recently, if you traveled outside of the contiguous, New York area, so you went to Florida, for example, you would have to quarantine for 10 days and then not have symptoms to return to campus. That question has since been removed from the requirements based on ever-changing CDC guidelines. If you're doing international travel, though, that still does apply. So that's current state. When we return to campus, it's going to be a different situation. And there is going to be 3 things that people are going to need to document to get on campus. We will not be using the C-entry system to determine, are you authorized on campus? We will be using the Brooklyn College Navigator system, or a physical ID card if you do not have a smartphone. That will determine who's allowed to have access on campus. We fully understand that many individuals are very few new employees, but we have new students that were not here originally and did not have their ID taken. We will be setting up with campus safety places where students can come to take their pictures. So they'll get a physical ID and they'll be in BC Navigator. We also are working on options where students could email in their pictures and campus safety could set up the BC Navigator entry working with IT remotely. So that covers access. The next thing is symptoms. The Everbridge system will still be utilized by the university, and by each college. So everybody coming to campus will be required to complete the Everbridge system on a daily basis before you come in. And if you answer yes to any one of the risk variable questions, you will not be allowed access to campus. And you'll have a red check mark, which means you're not allowed access to campus. If you answered everything, no, we need everyone to be honest because it's the safety of others around us that's important. If you're able to honestly answer no to any one of the questions, and every one of the questions, you will have a little approved check mark on your phone, and you would show that to the person at the gate. For those individuals who do not have a smartphone, we have set up kiosks around the entrances, and the individual will be referred to the kiosk by the campus peace officer, and they will answer the questions appropriately. There's a third variable now, which is a new one, and there's questions come up at the chat. Vaccination status. And we will be checking. This is not like you go out in the supermarket and it's the honor system. We will be confirming vaccination status. Those people who were vaccinated in the state of New York should upload the Excelsior Pass from the state. And if you were vaccinated in the state of New York, in most cases, your vaccination, your information will appear on the Excelsior Pass, and you would show the Excelsior Pass to the person at the gate who will confirm that you were in fact vaccinated. Unfortunately, we have learned the Excelsior Pass does not work for everybody who is vaccinated in New York. And so the rules for those people, as well as those who are vaccinated outside of the state and possibly outside of the country, that information is also going to be collected. The university is working with Everbridge as a possible solution to be able to have that information uploaded into the Everbridge system, and that would be confirmed when someone came to the gate. In the absence of that, we will be asking individuals to actually show a picture or the card, the vaccination card, and that will be reviewed. Now, obviously, as I'm talking about all these steps, there's a lot of things to be checked for every single person coming on campus when we're moving from 400 people or so a day to thousands of people a day. We are now working with the university. We've asked for months, and now they started the pilot project today. The university is working with selected campuses, us included, to try to get as much of this information as possible electronically, and we will be able to then load it into our BC Navigator system. And hopefully, if everything works well, there will be one source where people could, come in and show an ID. If we're able to do that, if someone has access to BC Navigator because they're an authorized member of our community, they have a wellness check status that shows they're approved to come on campus, and they have proof of vaccination, then their BC Navigator will work, and it'll say, great, wherever we frame it, you have access to campus. If any one of those three things are missing, there will not be access to campus, and the BC Navigator system will indicate not access. The other variable instead of vaccinations is testing. So there will be a process for those individuals who are not vaccinated for whatever reason, that we will have the mandatory testing that will be done on a weekly basis. We're waiting for guidance from the university on that. My understanding is if you have an Excelsior pass, the testing information will actually appear on your smartphone. And if you don't, we'll learn from the university what the mechanism is for people to report that. But as you could see, we are taking all precautions possible to ensure that people who have access to campus, we're minimizing risk as much as possible, that to make sure that those people who are allowed on campus, do not have COVID. As I said, we're minimizing risk, as everybody knows the vaccines are not 100% effective, but by getting vaccinated, the risk is reduced significantly, both for getting COVID and from having severe symptoms from COVID. So again, we encourage people to get fully vaccinated. In the event that they are unable to, they will be tested. And, if people would like more information, please put it on the chat. And as we learn more, we will send out more specific operational details on how this all will work.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you to all our subject matter experts, because with the time remaining, they will be answering your questions that you uploaded in the chat that I will now read. The first question that we have is, can chairs require faculty and staff to state whether or not they have been vaccinated? And pretty much you answered that question, but if you want to add anything else to that.
No, just to add to that, in the chairs, supervisors, deans, others should not be asking individuals directly that question. That is considered, and we need to talk about this, that is considered somewhat confidential information per se. That's a personal choice. The system, the process in place will be that vaccination status will be confirmed when people enter the campus. So there's really no need for supervisors to ask people that question. Also, the supervisors are not going to be at the gate. So, it won't, the fact that they know that information will not help eliminate access. The guards at the gate will do that and make sure that, everybody coming on campus has met the requirements as I just stated.
Thank you. The next question is, does the remote work agreement apply to PSC and DC 37 members both?
Yes, it does. It applies to all staff.
Thank you. Who provides the approval for a department's plan for in-person staffing of offices?
That would be human resources. All the plans will be submitted to human resources. If human resources has questions, they will contact one of the subject matter experts depending on the question they may have.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm sorry, Alan, I thought I understood that question a different way.
Okay.
So you have your supervisor, your people as you go up, and you have your department head. So in terms of the number of people, or what is the mix of people, minimal number of people to fulfill this requirement of, okay, we have a presence on campus? I thought that was the question, but whoever raised it, maybe you can clarify that.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for clarification, I have another question, which is, do department chairs need to be on campus in August?
Department chairs, so faculty are following the academic calendar, and they are due back in August, yes? Anne?
So the beginning of the academic year is towards the end of August. It's the 25th, I think. Right,
Yeah,
at
so
the
the
end of year.
faculty are following the academic calendar. We as staff are scheduled to transition back beginning the week of August 2nd. So we're starting that transition, but faculty are following the academic calendar.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, if you are vaccinated, how do you have that information in the HR files?
Okay.
I'll
go
take
back
that
to-
one, Alan. I'm
okay.
sorry. We do, at the moment, we do not have that information in the file. And this is one of the challenges that university is facing with, can Everbridge do more? Can we get this Excelsior pass that's going to work for everyone? I don't think I said it in my comments earlier, but we're sitting in the beginning of June. And things could change again, obviously, in the same way that it changed with the virus and us learning something different every day. Alan mentioned the security, and we have these cards that those of us that were vaccinated, that card has your birth date on it and all this other personal information. That's a problem. So the university is working on what can we get, or where will this information be housed? It probably will be in HR, but I don't know right now what that looks like. So it's something still to be worked out.
Thank you. What percentage of students have in-person classes for fall, and what percentage of courses are in person?
I could take that. So the targets we have now, working with the university, the optimal targets, is that we would have up to 40% of the classes online and around 60% of classes in person or hybrid model. These are the general guidelines. Each campus has different specifics based on the actual campus. We are relatively close to those guidelines already. And we are currently working, the deans are working closely with the registrar's office to possibly make some adjustments to those as the situations have changed. But they're more of guidelines that will be somewhat campus specific. Internally, we are taking the approach that we like to have a schedule as close to final as possible by June 30th, so we could focus more on implementation and less so on constantly changing things due to changing schedules. We want to be fair to the faculty and our students in terms of their schedules. This does not preclude that a class that is online may want to make it hybrid by having one or two sections in person, possibly using Zoom Flex. I call it Zoom Flex, not High Flex. We are in a small classroom and maybe 3 or 4 people are in the room and the rest are Zooming in, or doing finals on campus. Those are all considered hybrid. And I know the deans are going to be working closely with the chairs to make any appropriate adjustments to that.
Okay, thank you. What type of devices or programs will be provided to transfer files, especially large files, from our home computers back to our office computers?
Okay, I'll take this one. So we actually have licenses at the campus for both Dropbox and OneDrive. I've been using Dropbox, from before we went off campus, so I have access to my files, whether I'm on campus or whether I'm off campus. I encourage those people who do not know how to use either one of these programs, they're similar, to please reach out to the help desk, and the help desk can give people guidance in terms of how to transfer the files they now have at home to Dropbox. Dropbox is your Dropbox. Unless you authorize someone to share your files, they do not have access to the files. When you return to campus, you will be able to access either Dropbox and OneDrive from your desktop computer and have access to exactly the same files you had at home. And for those people, most of us who are working a hybrid schedule, where you will be on campus partially based on the rotational schedule you're establishing supervisor, and be working from home partially, you won't have to transfer files back and forth every day. The files will be there with your last update. And your IT will provide this guidance that's already available or an IT could provide, individual guidance if people need that. But, we do not want people putting things on a flash drive, carrying it back and forth, because you could lose it and then you lose your information. Please use these wonderful tools that are available to us. They will make a tremendous difference. Trust me, I've been using it. It makes a tremendous difference in having access to files and not having to transport files back and forth.
Thank you. The next is a two-part question. Will parking permits be available? And will a 6-month credit or waiver be issued to parking permits to leverage for the period that they were not used during the pandemic?
Okay, I love this question, and I have unbelievably great news for people. Parking is part of our Auxiliary Enterprises Corporation. Our board recently met to approve our budget for next year. Any person who currently has a permit that they paid for, that they had, pre-pandemic, your parking will be covered throughout all of next year. So your parking will be covered through August 2022. We will not, we're in the process of hopefully getting new updated permits that we'll ask you to exchange. There will be no additional cost for those people who still have their permit, that they paid for from before, from August 2019 to March 2020. Individuals who do not have a permit, whether they're new employees or whether they're people who asked for a refund, they will have to purchase a permit for the full year. Also, due to the rotational schedules that people will be having, we are hoping that we have some extra spaces available, and we're working with Vice President Ron Jackson to possibly sell permits to some of our students who are in situations where they have a long way to travel, and the parking would come in handy, for the full semester.
Thank you. The next question, what are the appropriate steps to take if an employee, after reporting to work, claims the workspace is unsafe for them to work in?
Carrie, do you want to take it or do you want me to take it?
Sure, I'll take it. I'm sure you can add to my answer. I would encourage that first the individual bring their concerns to their supervisor, who may be able to resolve them at those concerns at the local level. If it has something to do with the schedule or workstation assignment, or some other operational aspect to the office's business. If the safety concern has more to do with facility, the same approach as pre-pandemic would apply, which is if it's an immediate need or concern, then you report the issue such as a ventilation outage to 5885 for immediate investigation. And if it's a health and safety matter, then it would be brought to, and it's urgent, it would be brought to our office's attention, and we would investigate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add on that, since I became senior vice president a little over 3 years ago, many of you know, I've taken facilities challenges as a top priority, starting with the bathrooms, but continue to do other things. Obviously, we know there's much more that needs to be done. After 60 years of not taking care of things at the level they should have been, we have a lot of challenges. The pandemic has further highlighted the importance of resolving these issues, and we've been working closely with the university from the start of the pandemic to come up with a long-range plan and a short-range plan and a long-range plan to deal with these issues. We've done assessments of pretty much every space on campus, Carrie and her team working with facilities planning and engineering. And we are systematically going through things that we're able to fix on campus. And we're in the process of working with the university for guidance on how to fix things that are beyond the capacity of our internal team. So I wanted to relay that. In the event there are spaces that are not usable, So for example, in Ingersoll Hall, 1310 and 2310, the new lecture halls, which are slated for renovation in the current years, Carrie has made an assessment that we are not comfortable utilizing those spaces, until they're actually renovated as part of a capital project in a couple of years. In the event there are other spaces that fall into that category, after an assessment is done, we will not utilize those spaces. But I can guarantee that we are taking this very seriously, and we will make sure that ventilation meets CDC standards in every space we are asking people to work or study in.
Thank you. The next question, why is there a push for pre-pandemic occupancy or scheduling by the spring is the first part of the question. And to condense in a sense, the second part, if it's already been proven that we've been able to work remotely and provide excellent customer service while doing so, why aren't we able to continue this level of flexibility if other institutions are doing so?
Okay, I'll take it, and then I guess others could jump in. So we are part of New York State and part of the CUNY system, and New York State is returning back to I guess pre-pandemic situations and states, but in a slow, rational manner. So, and we know many of our students want to return to campus. They came to Brooklyn College for an in-person experience, and they want an in-person experience, assuming everything is safe. We're doing all that we can to make sure everything is safe. So as employees of Brooklyn College, where we were hired to be in-person employees to satisfy the in-person demand, we need to make sure that we have, once again, for the fall, minimal presence on campus to make sure that it's safe and equitable. The guidance determination of spring 2022 will obviously depend on the situation in terms of COVID, as we get close to that point in time. That will be a decision at not at the campus level, at the state and university level, which will be consistent with other state and university, organizations, in New York. It's not a campus decision. In terms of why we need to come back to campus, the main reason why, again, we need minimal coverage that's equitable and safe in the fall is because we're going to have people on campus who are going to expect that employees are on campus to assist them as needed. It's not a judgment at this point. There's no judgment of can we work better or can we not work better remotely. We've been working remotely, but there's been minimal amount of people on campus. We need to address the needs of the people on campus, and that is why this approach is being followed.
Thank you. If a staff member is required to quarantine or does not meet the Everbridge approval, how will that impact their work schedule, annual, and sick time?
Okay. Anita, that's an HR question.
Yes, thank you. So if someone goes into quarantine, and if it's the first quarantine, there is an extended piece of FMLA that allows the person to take the time. I think we're at 10 days of quarantine now, as opposed to we started out at 14 days. And that time is not charged towards their sick time. It's charged to COVID or some other bank. Their sick time is not impacted. If I think comes under FFCRA, there's a form for it where they have to document. Somebody confirms, that they do in fact have COVID and they're quarantined for 10 days. That documentation comes to my office, to Selena Quinones, and we keep track of those people because you got to count down before they are allowed to come back to campus. If the person has, if it happens again, we've had cases where people have gotten COVID more than once. And this has become an issue with one of the unions. You don't get to continue to double dip into the, okay, we gave you the time and it wasn't, your sick time wasn't charged. The second time around, your sick time is charged. So it is an illness. You have to be out, you have to be quarantined. And they give you one blanket of time where your sick time is not charged. And that's the way that it stands right now. Other questions, Angie?
This is Carrie. I thought this would be an important time to just also mention that the CUNY guidance is regularly being updated. In fact, there was a recent change to the Everbridge questions to reflect the position, CDC and New York State position on domestic travel. So I think there was a question in the chat, which I think is related to time off or in terms of vaccination status. And just know that quarantine, the requirements for quarantine are related to that and to the review of CUNY, looking at how we align or differ in terms of level of safety. But I expect as we get closer to the fall semester, there's an acknowledgement that travel issues as well as vaccination status will need to be folded into guidance.
And Carrie, you just reminded me, we should also remind people on the call that the vaccination is also paid for people, employees that may not have taken a vaccine up to 8 hours. And this is to encourage people to get the vaccine. So hopefully all of the supervisors know that.
Thank you. Next question, just to be clear, if an individual has already submitted vaccine information and has passed the Everbridge for the day, they will have a check mark and can basically walk onto campus showing that. And is it just people who don't have smartphones and or who haven't been vaccinated who will need to stop at the front desk, at the entry point?
Okay, I'll take that one. So again, a lot depends on the mechanics and if we can get everything in the BC Navigator system, which will depend on getting access of this vaccination and wellness check data from the university. If, assuming perfect case scenario and it's all in one system, it'll be, again, people will be coming into campus, they'd show their BC Navigator and their BC Navigator would be active because they're meeting all the criteria. For those individuals who do not have a smartphone, they will have to spend a little more time to show people their physical ID, their Everbridge. They'll have to probably go to the kiosk for Everbridge because they don't have a smartphone, and they will need to show possibly their vaccination card unless it's built into the Everbridge kiosk. Again, a lot of this, we're still waiting for operational details. But again, and so the more efficient it is, the faster the lines will go. If it takes longer for people to come on campus, we're going to err on the side of safety, and we'll need everybody to be accommodating, whether you're an instructor who's waiting for students, or you're a supervisor waiting for employees to come. We just need everyone to have patience and understanding that we need to balance safety. And we're not going to rush people through if we can't confirm that they meet the requirements.
Alan, I just want to add something to what you said. So first of all, let's make clear the mechanics has not been worked out yet for how this is going to go, who's checking what, who has what information. But if the person, I think the question was something about if they are not vaccinated. If the person has not been vaccinated, they will be required to go through this COVID test weekly. So again, behind that, we're not sure how that's going to work yet, but you are either vaccinated, there's a mechanism to confirm that you have been vaccinated. If you have not been vaccinated, it will be a requirement that you are tested. And that test is weekly. And so there's probably some other mechanics to show that you were tested. Okay, still has to be worked out.
Thank you. Can supervisors justifiably dismiss staff from job site if that staff member is continuously displaying particular symptoms, such as coughing and sneezing, even if they wear a mask or face covering?
I think I'm gonna refer to Anita, but the answer is no.
I was gonna
That
say,
cannot
I
be
don't
done, but
think-
Anita will give the
Yeah.
details. Yeah.
I don't think so. When we started with the COVID, a lot of people made assumptions or jumped to things when in fact it had nothing to do with the virus. So we had like mass hysteria of people acting in different ways, understandably, again, fear and anxiety. If someone is coughing and sneezing, that does not automatically equate that they have the virus. So no, you cannot send that person home. You can inquire if the person's not feeling well. I encourage people, if you're not feeling well, if you're sick, please, take the time and go home. But you can't assume that somebody has COVID. No, the answer is no.
Thank you for that answer. In the library and possibly other units that have traditionally been open later than 7 p.m. and on weekends, the form doesn't allow for those schedules. So is there flexibility within those hours that are posted, or is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. rigid?
So is that a question related to the work agreement, Tunji?
I think it's more about staffing.
So staffing, and again, this is a question or guidance for the managers of the people who are running the departments and having to review these plans. Because we worked, let's say 7 to 7 in a normal situation, does not mean that we have to work 7 to 7 during this transition. So the question becomes, does that make sense? Do we need to be operational at that hour? Yes, there is flexibility, but the guidelines that the university posted in terms of start times and end times for the flexible work schedule, this was negotiated with the union. So everybody, please just keep that in mind. Established times for start and established times for ending. So yes, it's flexible. This work agreement was again negotiated with the union. So people should try to stay within that period of time and to be flexible. This is only for the fall semester. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Any updates on CUNY's policy on testing and quarantine requirements for fully vaccinated staff and faculty when they are in close contact with a positive case?
Carrie, you can jump in here on this one. And again, unless the person, a close positive case, the question is, how do they know that that person is positive? Let's assume the employee said, I am positive. Then I would encourage, depending upon the length of time that the employee was exposed to the person who said they tested positive, that they go out and to get a test. It is known that people that are vaccinated can contract COVID again. So it really depends upon how much exposure. And again, if we're practicing our social distancing and doing what we're supposed to be doing and wearing a mask in the environment, that shouldn't happen. But if it does, I would encourage that person to, go out and get a COVID test. Carrie, I'm not sure, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, that reflects our current policy, which is more conservative and protective in that CDC and New York State have found that vaccinated individuals are they're not required to participate or enter into quarantine. We are awaiting updates to the CUNY guidance on what that requirement is, and how that will affect the definition of a close contact and required vaccination, required quarantine.
Quarantine.
Yeah, quarantine. Thank you.
Mhm.
Is still in the works. I think is still being reviewed. But for now, that's right. If you are identified as a close quarantine or close contact, regardless of vaccination status, as of now, you are required to go into quarantine and obtain a negative test before returning to work.
Yeah, just
For
to add
those
to
who are
that, yeah,
just now.
I'm looking at my Everbridge. First question, have you had any known close contact with a person confirmed or suspected to have COVID-19 in the past 10 days? If you have to answer yes. You will then not be allowed on campus, and Ayana from HR will reach out to you about further guidance. The guidance may change based on where we are situationally. This question may no longer be relevant when we're back based on where we are situationally, but as of now, yes, that would be a requirement.
Yeah. Can department offices determine that minimal coverage means they are only open some days?
I'll take that. So I think minimal coverage, again, we're asking the supervisors working with their division heads to define that. And I think the objective is to be open during the normal business hours, and in the absence of that, to work collaboratively with your colleagues to make sure there's appropriate coverage. So for example, if you're a department that has 2 employees and your neighbors are a department that have 2 employees, or someone else in your division has 2 employees, you could work collaboratively to make sure that there is coverage for any student, faculty, staff member who may come to campus. So those people will be served, in the event, and if there's anything that's in person. So if you're in a large office and you have a lot of people, you should be providing coverage during normal business hours. But in the event you just don't have the number of people to do that, then yes, you need to work collaboratively. There's a possibility Office A may be closed 2 days a week, Office B maybe then closed the other 2 days a week during the summer hours. But there's communication effectively that if people come to the office, they know who to contact, and that the people working remotely are actually available remotely to deal with the issues. So it's sort of a hybrid answer to that.
Thank you. I just want to go back a little bit around that flexibility from that 7 to 7 time offering. The question is, with the remote work agreement, does not include weekends. So can we assume that the campus will be closed for in-person services on weekends in the fall? And this is from the library.
No, at this point, we believe the campus will be open 7 days a week. In fact, due to density, having some services or classes being run on campus, throughout that time frame, we'll have less density, and we could have do even more services. But it should be for places where we're doing if the library was open on the weekend previously, as long as there is staff available and there's demand from the students, then the offices should continue to be open and providing the same level of service. As we said, this is about, we're an in-person organization. We need to provide the same services we provided pre-pandemic. We're just doing it in a more minimal manner.
Thank you. If someone is requesting an accommodation to not come in to work from home, should they be discussing with their supervisor first? And then there's a part 2 after whomever answers this question. I'll ask the part 2 afterwards.
Okay, I think it depends upon if we're talking medical or we're talking general. I think it's okay. We've had, many employees getting accommodations by discussing with their manager I need a chair to help me with my, back problem or whatever. And the department has provided the equipment that the person needs to be more productive in the workplace. They had that they raised it, they had that conversation. Versus when we start talking a medical situation, that would again have to come to my office, because that is something that should not be shared with their immediate supervisor or with the department.
Yeah, I would add to that, if someone believes they're going to be requesting an accommodation, a reasonable accommodation, as per the guidelines through HR, I would suggest that they tell their supervisor they're requesting that without giving the specifics, and then work with HR on the specifics. But as Anita said, employees should not be discussing their medical or personal, information with supervisors. That's a conversation between them and HR.
And I'll add to what you said, that we have, and I think the president set this guideline of holding off on review or getting back to people. We're getting accommodation, request for an accommodation, and we've also received some work agreements. Holding off on all of that until we had this meeting today to talk to managers, chairs, deans about here are the expectations, here are the guidelines, here's what you need to think about in terms of what makes sense for your areas, so that everybody's a little bit more prepared. And we know in making a decision about someone working remotely, that you've considered across the board that this makes sense. So I think it was June 15th, I said to somebody, we will get back. We will start reviewing these things as they come in, now that we've had this meeting and people have a little better understanding of where we need to get to.
Thank you. So part 2 of that question really leads to the next question. It's all about trying to be fair and equitable when trying to assign split schedules and making sure that everyone has the same amount of days. So with that, the question is, do approval of staffing plans need to move through a hierarchy of approvals? Also, like, for example, if department chairs supervise staff, must the chair submit their staffing plans to their deans for approval?
Yeah, I'll take that, and then Nick can jump in. So we want the supervisors, we need supervisors to work with their deans and their division heads, because we have spaces that are shared spaces. As I mentioned earlier, we'll have situations where departments may need to work collaboratively to provide coverage because they just don't have enough people to handle. We're not asking anyone to come in 5 days a week. So if it's a one-person office, we need to have collaboration. So in order to make sure that we're equitable, we are asking the supervisors to work with their division head, their dean, et cetera. We're also looking at the other end of the spectrum. If the supervisor is overstaffing, again, I don't use the word minimal a lot. I've said the word minimal more time than last week. I probably said in my lifetime. We're asking for minimal coverage. We want supervisors to make sure that everyone is consistent with minimal coverage. Department A cannot have a schedule where people are coming in 2 times a week, and Department B has a schedule people coming in 5 days a week when there's not a justifiable reason for that. So we need the divisional head to review it to make sure that we're dealing with things equitably on both ends of the spectrum. We believe that if people follow the guidelines, minimal, safe, and equitable, no one will come close to the maximum COVID, number of people in a space. And we are taking the most conservative approach possible to calculate that number. We do not believe, we are hoping that no one even comes close to the number. We are not giving you that number because we don't want you to target toward a number. We want you to target toward minimal, safe, equitable. And then we do the review about the space. Please don't get hung up on how many people can you have there safely. We don't expect you to come near that number, given our most conservative estimates. In the cases where that may be an issue, we'll deal with those people individually. Please don't focus on a target. We don't think it's in our best interest.
Thank you. Now, regarding equity, if some people in the department want to come in less and some people want to come in more, is it okay as long as it averages out to ensure the minimal coverage requirement is met?
So again, I would throw that back to the to the head of the department that's looking across. Let's say if you have 5 units, if that makes sense and that's okay with you, then I would say that that is okay. The problem that we run into, or that you will run into, is that you have Department A saying, why does Department B get to stay home and work remotely 100%, not coming in, and we are 100% in person in the office? Those are the kinds of things that you have to balance. And then the other thing I want to say is, I think we're using the label, I think we talked about this, Alan, using the label plan. The plan for the people on this call is to look at their staff. How many people do you have? What would that number be if you identified the minimal number of people to come in to fulfill the requirement that you are in person to provide that particular service? That department head is looking at those 5 units and saying, okay, this looks balanced, it's fair, and it's equitable. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the plan. There's not a template that says you need to fill out one from column A, one from column B. It's how many staff do you have? How many people are impacted? We're talking full-time, part-time. Is the supervisor present? Am I treating Department A the same way as I'm treating Department B, and it's fair and equitable across the board as we transition through the fall semester? That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I just want to add, we have departments that have been on campus fully 100% of the time since March 2020, because their work requires them to be on campus. Because if you're a plumber on our campus, the only way you can work is to be on campus. So equitable is dependent, as Anita said, on your department's needs.
Right.
We're not going to be going around and saying this one came in 1 time a week, this one person's coming in 2 times a week. It depends on the supervisor being equitable and everybody participating in coming to campus, unless there's an approved reasonable accommodation that HR approved. Otherwise, everyone's expected to participate.
Thank you. Will there be an increase of security officers patrolling halls and offices to ensure that mask requirements are maintained? And there's a second part of that, which is, will there also be extra staff hired, specifically in the role of COVID compliance officers, to ensure that masks are being worn by everyone on campus?
Okay, I'll take that one. So, for those of you who do not know, hiring a campus peace officers goes through the university, and there's a training program, an academy that everybody needs to go through in order to be assigned to a campus. We've had several, resignations and retirements since COVID, because the university has a vacancy review board that approves every single personnel action that we request, whether it's a full-time or a part-time position. We did not have a need at the beginning of this to have more peace officers because we didn't have that many people on campus. When we were ready to proceed with the request, we were allocated 1. So we have 1 person in the pool now. We have 4 more hopefully slated for the next pool, but the university is working to have a contract with an outside organization, providing security. We're hoping that's in place to give us more flexibility. We also hired, during this period of time in the carrier's office, we hired 4 COVID, public health ambassadors, I believe we call them, in part-time positions. They've been going around, doing spot checks and doing informational sessions, et cetera. That is paid for by stimulus money. We have not received our allocation and ways that we could use stimulus money as of yet from the university. We are hoping to get that information shortly, and with guidance, and then we will work on a plan that will allow us to address the needs we have and the needs the university requires us to comply with, during the period of time, and we will be sharing that information with the campus community. So everything is fully transparent about how we are spending the stimulus money. Safety is the top priority. So we will spend what we need to spend to ensure the safety, but also Carrie is one person, she cannot supervise 50, 60 people. And we have to balance all the extremes, but we will do all we can to ensure safety and ensuring compliance with standards. And we also will be having signage and other communications to articulate our current guidelines, which includes wearing a mask when you're outside or inside, even if you're fully vaccinated.
Thank you. What if an employee wants to work fully remotely because they do not want to increase the risk of COVID spread to elderly family members living with them? The family members and the employee are unwilling to get vaccinated at this time.
Yeah, I think it's going to go back to what Renita said, and we spoke about there. We shared the link, what reasonable accommodation means as per the university. That individual, any individual, should read that. And then if they meet one of the criteria or more of the criteria in that guidance, they should be filing a request, or they can file a request with human resources. That's at this point, those are the criteria we're allowed to accept for a reasonable accommodation.
Thank you. Next, what is the storage capacity limit for services such as Dropbox and Onedrive?
I don't know if David Best is here. It's some huge number. I have a lot of files. I've not gotten any warning about, access. I have PDFs, megabytes. Kelly knows. She's filmed 1 gig.
Okay.
If Kelly has filmed huge files, could deal with it. There's plenty. Oh, she made a mistake. Okay, but it's a lot.
Right.
We've not had any instances where somebody complained they ran out of storage.
Okay, great. What news is there on ventilation in the buildings, and is it available online? Because staff are worried about the ventilation situation in West Quad, which was already not the greatest before the pandemic.
Okay, so Carrie.
We're working with HR and communications and Alan's team to make occupants or room capacity information, to communicate that to supervisors in a meaningful way. And those capacity numbers are reflective of a building's ventilation as well as space. There may, just taking West Quad as an example, the air handling units are required to provide at least 20% outside air, and are, where possible, are being adjusted to provide more outside air. And with less density in each of the spaces, whether because of room capacity or because of your operational or your rotation schedules for the fall, that equates to more fresh air per person in the space. If, and we know of just a few places, but if a space has over time, so there's always the possibility that a space that was designed to be a large open area has since become cut up in some way to provide more privacy and to meet the needs of an incoming office or department. And in those cases, if there is a room or an office where there might be a unintended impact to airflow, and so that will need to be considered. But at a minimum, the space is going to be able to provide, to be safe for at least one person, and And so it is a bit of a, we don't know all of those spaces off. We have not been able to walk every single office space. And so that will be in part a conversation that needs to happen if you do know of a location that is like that. And as I think Renita and maybe Tunji mentioned, that we are having conversations with departments and offices that have shared spaces, and those spaces tend to have more complex patterns of movement and higher volume. So in those cases, we're taking a closer look.
Okay. If public schools are required to be in person and we have early college, high school courses, will those be online or in person? And who decides?
Okay. Based on my understanding is, we work with the high school. We have Brooklyn College Academy on campus. It's a contract between the Department of Education and between the university. Our expectation at this point is that the Brooklyn College Academy will have 100% attendance in person. At this time, we planned on them coming back partially last year, and we work with them, and they're going to have a separate entrance. They're going to have separate protocols. So we're going to make sure that they're as isolated as possible. But I'm going to turn it over to the provost. She may have other things to add, since the Brooklyn College Academy is under the Academic Affairs portfolio.
Thank you, Alan. So this comes to the Reentry Review Board, right, which establishes guidelines for all classes on campus, and we'll be having those guidelines. We will review the protocols that we put in place for the Brooklyn College Academy and any other high school program on campus. They have asked for that review, and we will provide that review. So that will go forward now that we know that the high schools will be in person.
Thank you so much. And at this time, I'd like to thank everyone for submitting their questions that we were able to address during this time limit. It has been my pleasure to serve as your moderator today. And before we go into our wrap up, I want to remind you all about our campus webpage entitled Returning Safely Together, where you will find additional information and resources. And with that, I would like to welcome back President Anderson.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for this. First, I want to thank Tunji, fearless moderator. I want to thank the subject matter experts who spoke today. Extremely helpful information. Not all your questions were answered. First, I want to say excellent questions, every one of them. I really appreciate them. Second, I want to say we know we couldn't get to all of them. What we hope to do is to group them and put them into an FAQ. Number one. Number two, we're doing another meeting next week, as you know, with employees. You're welcome to that meeting as well. My guess is that almost all of the questions you have are very similar or identical to the questions that employees generally have about these matters. So we're going to answer a lot more of these questions next time. Maybe we can organize them in some fashion and get through them more rapidly. The last thing I just want to underscore is that, again, this is about minimal coverage. It's not about perfection. The fall, it's just the fall. It's not about perfection. It's about collaboration, coming together and trying to pull something together to begin to transition back. Everyone sharing that load, unless they have an accommodation for a fully remote schedule, which goes to Renita in the ordinary course of events. Last thing I want to say is get vaccinated, everyone. It is safe, it is highly effective, and it is free. Please get vaccinated if you haven't already. We will take all your questions. Continue to send your questions. So you can send them to me, you can send them to Carrie, you can send them to Alan. Actually, I think, Marcus, we have a place for people specifically to send their questions for next week's forum. Very much appreciate your questions. They're all legitimate and important concerns. We'll continue to answer them. Thanks, everyone.